She was standing in the middle of my front lawn, holding the envelope in one hand and her phone in the other, screaming into it like her life depended on it. "Yes, he's threatening me. He tried to grab me. I need the police here now." Her voice pierced through the air, loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. I stood there frozen, staring at the envelope she clutched like a trophy, my name still visible through the address window. That was my paycheck, my rent money, and somehow I was the one being accused. The sound of sirens in the distance started getting louder. My heart pounded in my chest, not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I knew how this could go. One wrong move, one assumption, one officer who didn't ask questions, and my entire life could unravel, all because Karen, the woman who lived 3 doors down, decided that my mail somehow belonged to her. A few neighbors had come out of their homes, standing awkwardly on their porches, watching everything unfold like some kind of afternoon drama. Some whispered, some filmed, and there I was, stuck in the center of it all, trying to hold on to my sanity and not say something I'd regret. She looked over at me with this smug mix of triumph and fear, as if she was waiting for me to lash out, to prove her lie. But I didn't. I kept my hands where they could be seen. I stayed still. I let the chaos swirl around me because deep down, I knew the truth was on my side. The only question was, would anyone else believe it once the cops arrived? Or would this be the day everything changed because of a stolen envelope and a woman who knew how to weaponize a scream? It had been a rough few months, and that paycheck meant more to me than just money. It was the result of long nights freelancing, juggling side gigs, doing everything I could to stay afloat. Rent was due in 3 days, and that envelope held the exact amount I needed to keep a roof over my head. Every Thursday, without fail, the mail carrier dropped off my check right around 3:45 p.m. It became part of my routine. Finish work, grab the mail, and breathe a little easier, knowing I made it through another week. That Thursday was no different, at least not at first. I had just finished a Zoom call and stepped onto the porch around 4 p.m. with my usual anticipation. The sun was out, birds chirping, and for a second it actually felt peaceful. But when I opened the mailbox and found nothing but some supermarket flyers and a dentist reminder card, my stomach dropped. I checked the app. My payment had been marked as delivered. That was the moment something clicked. A creeping suspicion, one that had been lingering for weeks, finally took form. I remembered the conversation with my neighbor a few days prior, how she said her Amazon packages kept disappearing, how others mentioned seeing unfamiliar people wandering around during deliveries. And then there was Karen. She had always been nosy, always watching. I'd caught her peeking out her blinds more times than I could count. At first, it seemed like typical neighborhood busybody behavior, but now it all felt different, intentional, calculated. And as I stood there on my porch, confused and suddenly on edge, I had no idea that what was about to unfold would not only change how I saw my neighbor, but how I saw the entire idea of safety in my own home. Karen had always been one of those neighbors you never really got to know, but somehow always felt like she knew everything about you. She moved in about 2 years ago, alone, no kids, no pets, just her and an ever-rotating collection of wind chimes that never quite matched the neighborhood vibe. From the beginning, there was this air of superiority about her, like she thought she was sent to keep the rest of us in line. If your trash bins were out 5 minutes too early, she'd leave a note. If your car was parked a little too close to the curb, she'd call the HOA. And heaven help you if your lawn wasn't mowed to her liking. Suddenly, you were the reason the property value was plummeting. But it wasn't just about control. Karen had this unsettling way of pretending she was the victim, even when she was clearly the aggressor. I'd seen her yell at teenagers for walking too loud past her house, claim a delivery driver was lurking, just because he took a moment to check his route, and threatened to report a neighbor for verbal assault when he asked her, politely, to stop taking pictures of his kids playing basketball. There was always a scene, always drama, always Karen at the center, voice trembling just enough to sound distressed while still sharp enough to cut through anyone who dared question her. She and I had only spoken a handful of times. I usually tried to avoid her, just like most of the neighborhood did. But every once in a while, I'd catch her watching me, through her curtains, from her front step, pretending to be watering the same plants that hadn't grown in months. And I started to wonder if her strange energy wasn't just about being nosy. It felt targeted, like she needed someone to be the villain in whatever story she was writing in her head. And for some reason, I fit the part. Still, I never thought she'd cross the line. Never thought she'd go from passive-aggressive lawn notes to outright theft. But that's the thing about people like Karen. They don't snap all at once. They build up slowly, quietly, until the moment they think they can get away with it. And that moment, for her, was the day my paycheck arrived. That Thursday started off like any other, with a cup of lukewarm coffee and a to-do list I had no real intention of finishing. The weather was warm, unusually so for early spring, and the breeze carried that kind of calm that makes you believe nothing could possibly go wrong. I had wrapped up a client call around 3:30 p.m., feeling hopeful. The project I'd just completed was the biggest one I'd landed in months, and that paycheck, due to arrive that day, was going to pull me out of the red. I even smiled a little as I stepped onto the porch, ready to grab the envelope and treat myself to a small celebration later that evening. But as I opened the mailbox, that smile evaporated. It was empty. Well, not completely. There were a few coupon flyers and an ad for some new roof cleaning service, but the envelope with the distinct blue logo from the company I'd worked with, gone. I blinked, thinking maybe I was too early. Maybe the mailman hadn't come yet. I pulled out my phone, opened the tracking app, and saw the dreaded notification, delivered at 3:12 p.m. My heart began to race, not in full panic yet, but in that uneasy way when something doesn't add up. I scanned the street. No mail truck in sight. A couple of kids rode by on bikes, and across the road, Mr. Lyle was watering his garden like he did every afternoon. Everything looked normal. Too normal. But that's when I saw her. Karen. She was walking briskly up her driveway with what looked like a stack of mail in her hand, but one envelope stood out. White, standard business size, just like the ones I'd received before. I couldn't see the logo from where I stood, but something about the way she clutched it, separate from the rest, made my stomach twist. I walked down my steps and toward the sidewalk, trying to keep my voice light. I called out, "Hey, Karen! Did the mailman maybe drop something off at your door by mistake?" She turned, startled, like she hadn't expected anyone to notice. "No," she snapped quickly, eyes darting to the envelope, and then back to me. Why would he? I didn't want to accuse her outright. Not yet. But the closer I got, the more I could see it. The corner of the envelope was torn just enough to reveal a few letters. My name. Clear as day. "I think that's mine," I said carefully, pointing to it. She recoiled like I'd just insulted her. "Excuse me, this is my mail. Are you accusing me of stealing?" Her voice rose, pitch climbing with each word. I barely had time to respond before she backed away, yelling loud enough for the entire block to hear, "Get away from me! I'm calling the police!" And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just dealing with a thief. I was dealing with someone who knew exactly how to twist the narrative. I stood there, stunned, as Karen fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling in a way that looked more theatrical than frightened. She held the envelope behind her back like a child caught red-handed, but unwilling to let go of the cookie jar. I took a small step forward, not threateningly, just enough to be heard over her rising hysteria. "Karen, listen. That envelope has my name on it. I saw it. I'm not trying to start anything. I just need it back." Her eyes widened, and she took 2 exaggerated steps back, pointing at me like I was some deranged intruder. "You're harassing me. You're threatening me in broad daylight." Her voice was piercing, and I noticed a curtain twitch in one of the neighboring windows. She glanced around quickly, aware of the growing audience, and dialed 911 with a flair that felt more like theater than emergency. "Yes, there's a man threatening me right now. He followed me to my house. He's demanding I give him something that's mine." She paused, eyes locking on mine. "He's getting aggressive. Please hurry." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own check was now evidence in a false report, and there I was, stuck, silent, afraid that any move I made could be twisted into confirmation of her lies. I tried to speak calmly, knowing how fragile these moments could be. "Karen, I'm not moving any closer. I'm just standing here. You know that envelope isn't yours." That only made her angrier. She pulled it out from behind her back, holding it up like some kind of prize, the address side conveniently turned away from me. "This came to my house," she shouted. "It's addressed to me. You're just trying to take my mail." My mouth opened to argue, to point out the obvious, to remind her that stealing someone else's mail was a federal crime. But I stopped myself, because I knew if the police showed up right then and saw her screaming, me standing there trying to explain, and a crowd of silent spectators unsure of what they were watching, things could spiral fast. Karen saw that hesitation in me. I could tell, and she leaned into it. Her posture changed from rage to feigned fear, clutching the envelope to her chest and whispering just loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "I don't feel safe." That broke something in me. Not anger, not panic, but a deep, simmering frustration. I wasn't just being accused of something I didn't do. I was watching someone manipulate the system in real time, twisting the truth in front of witnesses and using fear like a weapon. And worst of all, she knew exactly what she was doing. She counted on the drama. She counted on being believed first. And as the sound of sirens echoed closer, I realized I wasn't just in a petty dispute with a neighbor. I was in the middle of a performance, and she had already cast herself as the victim. Karen's voice into the phone was frantic, breathless, perfectly calibrated for panic. "Yes, he's still here. He's blocking my driveway and trying to steal from me. I don't feel safe at all." She kept glancing at me between her shouted sentences, her eyes scanning for reactions, making sure the neighbors were still watching. And they were. More had gathered now, some peeking from their windows, others lingering on sidewalks, phones in hand, not sure whether to record or retreat. I stood on the curb, arms crossed, trying to stay calm. My gut told me to pull out my phone and start recording too, but something about it all made me hesitate. It felt surreal, like a bad play unfolding in slow motion, and I was the character who didn't know his lines. Karen had the stage, and she was milking it for every second. "I told him to leave and he refuses. He's shouting at me," she cried, even though I hadn't said a word in at least 2 minutes. She was talking fast, barely pausing for breath, layering her story with just enough detail to sound convincing to someone who couldn't see the scene. The kicker. She still had the envelope. She hadn't dropped it, hadn't put it down. She clutched it tightly like it would disappear if she let go, because she knew what it was. She knew it wasn't hers. The dispatcher must have said the police were on the way because she let out a breathy, dramatic "thank you" and hung up. Then she turned to me like she was ready for round 2. "You better hope they don't believe me," she hissed under her breath, her voice suddenly cold and steady. The performance had ended, and what was left behind was something far more calculating. "You're going to regret bothering me." I said nothing. My instincts screamed at me to back away, go inside, shut the door and lock it. but I couldn't walk away from my own stolen mail, and I definitely couldn't leave her to twist the story alone. The envelope was still in her hand, and even from where I stood, I could see the edge of my name sticking out. And yet somehow I knew, when those sirens stopped at the curb, I wasn't going to be greeted like the victim. The sirens wailed closer, cutting through the tension like a blade. Karen adjusted her stance, smoothing her hair and letting her bottom lip tremble ever so slightly. By the time the squad car pulled up, she looked like she'd just survived a mugging. 2 officers stepped out, one tall and expressionless, the other scanning the scene like he already had his version of events. Karen rushed toward them, pointing directly at me before they'd even finished closing the doors. "That's him. That's the man who tried to take my mail and followed me to my house," she cried, waving the envelope in the air like a flag of righteousness. I raised both hands slowly, not in surrender, but to show I had nothing to hide. The officers glanced at me, then at her, and one approached her first, notebook out. She launched into her story, loud enough that I could hear every word. He came at me screaming. I told him to leave me alone and he wouldn't. I was terrified. "Just look at me." The second officer walked over to me, hand resting near his belt, eyes cautious. "Sir, can you tell me what happened?" I nodded, forcing my voice to stay even. "I came out to get my mail, saw she had my paycheck envelope with my name on it. I asked about it, politely, and she flipped out and called you. Do you have any proof the mail is yours? It's got my name and address on it." She's still holding it. The officer looked over at Karen, who was still mid-performance. I saw him hesitate. He motioned to his partner, who leaned in and whispered something. Then finally, the first officer asked Karen if they could see the envelope. Her expression faltered for just a second, but she handed it over. He turned it around slowly, inspecting the address window. Then his brow furrowed. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "this check is addressed to him." Karen's eyes darted wildly. Her mouth opened like she had more to say, but nothing came out. The air shifted. The performance was over. The truth had stepped into the spotlight, and now it was Karen who stood exposed. One officer stepped away to run my ID just in case. The other handed me the envelope with a quiet apology. Karen said nothing. She didn't even look at me. And yet, I could feel the weight of her glare. Silent, sharp, and seething. The silence after the officer read my name on the envelope was heavier than anything Karen had screamed. It was as if her entire performance had collapsed under the weight of a single, undeniable truth. She tried to reach for some explanation, mumbling about how it must have been a mistake, how the mailman probably delivered it to her box by accident, how she hadn't even looked at the name. But the cracks in her voice betrayed her. She knew she was cornered. The officer didn't argue. He didn't need to. He held the envelope between 2 fingers like it was evidence, and it was. Clear as day, my full name and address printed in bold. There was no confusion to be had. No mix-up. Just a woman caught in a lie she thought she could get away with. The officer turned to me, handed it over gently and said, "Here you go, sir. Sorry about the trouble." I nodded, trying not to let the relief show too much. I still felt on edge, like if I exhaled too loudly, it might all start up again. I slid the check into my back pocket, where it should have been in the first place. That's when Mr. Lyle, the neighbor across the street, stepped onto his lawn. "I saw the whole thing," he called out, arms crossed. "That mail truck stopped at his place, not hers. She walked over there after it left." The officers turned, listening as more voices joined in, 2 other neighbors who had watched from their porches. One woman even said she saw Karen tear open the mailbox and glance over her shoulder before walking away with the envelope in hand. Karen's face paled. Her shoulders slumped. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. There was no way to spin it now. The truth wasn't just written on that envelope. It was echoing through the neighborhood, carried by the very people she thought were too scared or too silent to speak up. The officers exchanged a quiet look. One of them stepped aside to write a report, while the other gently asked Karen to come speak with him near the patrol car. She followed, silent and furious, her footsteps no longer dramatic, just defeated. And me? I just stood there, the truth finally in my hand, wondering how close I'd come to being buried under a lie. Karen didn't say a word as she walked with the officer toward the patrol car. Her expression had shifted from outrage to something colder, something resentful. There was no apology, no hint of remorse, just silence and a burning glare that never left my direction. I didn't care anymore. I had my check back, and that alone felt like a miracle. The officer told me they'd be filing a report, that mail theft was a serious federal offense, and that I might be contacted if charges moved forward. He also reminded me to keep my mail slot locked, maybe even invest in a secure box. I nodded, thanked him, and walked back toward my porch with my heart still thumping. The neighbors began to disperse, some offering nods of quiet solidarity as they went. Mr. Lyle gave me a thumbs up before heading back to his garden. It was over, at least for now. But something had shifted permanently. That sense of safety I once felt, the idea that home was a place free from confrontation or betrayal, was gone. Karen didn't go to jail that day. She wasn't handcuffed or driven away, despite what she'd tried to pull. The officers gave her a firm warning and told her they'd be keeping an eye on things. It wasn't justice in the way I'd imagined, but it was enough to make her retreat, at least for the time being. In the days that followed, Karen stopped her usual surveillance routine. No more peeking from behind curtains. No more mysterious walks past my porch. She kept her distance, and I kept mine. But I never forgot the way she weaponized the system, how close I came to being painted as a criminal for simply defending what was mine. And I knew deep down that next time, she might not be so sloppy. Looking back, I realize how fragile the line is between truth and perception. All it took was one lie, one well-timed phone call, and I was nearly branded a threat in my own neighborhood. It didn't matter that I was calm. It didn't matter that I was right. For a moment, her voice carried more weight than the facts ever could. And that's what scared me the most. Not Karen herself, but how easily she could manipulate the situation with a few well-placed words and a trembling voice. What saved me that day wasn't just the envelope or the officers doing their job. It was the quiet courage of my neighbors, the witnesses who chose to speak up. Without them, this story might have had a very different ending. So now I double-check my mailbox. I stay alert. But more importantly, I keep my phone ready, because I know better. I know how fast truth can be buried under a louder lie. If there's one thing I hope people take from this, it's that calm doesn't mean weak. And truth, no matter how much someone tries to twist it, will always find its way back to the surface. Sometimes, it just takes a little longer to be heard.